Good evening. It is now 6:42 and I call to order the regular meeting of the Victoria City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda this evening are announcements. Just a friendly reminder that the city offices will be closed on Monday, September 1st in observance of Labor Day and will resume normal business hours on Tuesday, September 2nd. The City Council will visit various city properties and amenities as part of a workshop on Monday, September 8th, beginning at 3:30 p.m. Council will leave from City Hall and will post addresses and anticipated times of arrival as part of the meeting notice posted at City Hall. The next item on our agenda this evening is to adopt the final agenda. Council, can I get a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Motion to adopt the final agenda.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Open forum is next on the agenda. This is an opportunity for anyone to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda and not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date. We have one individual who has registered to speak in advance this evening, who is Dr. Erin Radke, the District 112 Superintendent. Ms. Radke, welcome. Please step forward to the podium. Welcome. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to be here, Council. Dr. Erin Radke, I'm the superintendent in Eastern Carver County Schools. This is my second year, but I was the assistant superintendent for a handful of years before that, so this is my 6th year in the district, so I'm very proud of the work that's going on in Eastern Carver County. I have an opportunity today to share a little bit about what's happening in the district. Number one, we have 2 priorities this year. Always academic excellence, ensuring that we are providing the very best for our community through our schools. What is one of the things that's such a beautiful thing about Eastern Carver County Schools is it knits our 4 communities together, Victoria, Carver, Chaska, and Chan, and it is that one unifying thing for our 4 cities. The second piece is financial stability, and like many entities, financial stability is something we're striving for. It's a concern. And we know with federal funding and state funding for education that there are some challenges in front of us. Many districts across the state are facing it, and so is Eastern Carver County Schools. It's not a surprise. I didn't all of a sudden say, oh, whoops, we need more money. This has been something we've been anticipating, projecting, and planning. And when I started as the superintendent on July 1st, that was one of my questions that I asked during my 100-day tour, which was, what should I prioritize as the budget remains a challenge, because we knew that it was coming. One of the things that we do is we always do a survey in our community before we decide if we're going to go out for a referendum or not. And just really excited to report that 95% of our families say that their children is receiving a well-rounded education that prepares them for their future. 84% believe that their investments in local schools is well invested, and 87% of our families and communities say that they rate the quality of ECCS schools as excellent or good. So we're really proud of this, excited about the commitment and the support we have from our community for our schools. Like I said, our financial future is a concern, and we want to create some stability. And so I want to share a little bit about how we got here, and I think that's really important because our community does want to know that we're being fiscally responsible, that we're being thoughtful, that we're investing in the right places, and that we are looking at our operational efficiencies and making sure we're getting a return on our investment. But we do know that the state has not kept up with inflation, and I don't have that graph. And it creates a gap. So over 2 decades, we've had the state not keeping up with inflation as things have gone up. So that is one structural issue we just have at the state level. The second is inflation is affecting all of us. So if your gas tank and your refrigerator costs more to fill, so does ours at the school district. And so there's some concerns there as well. We also want the very best teachers inside of our schools in front of our students. That's what they deserve. And our industry continues to be very competitive and wanting to make sure that we have the best compensation and benefits for our teachers and our staff so that we can recruit and retain high quality talent. The only way that we can address these issues is contain cost or raise revenue. And so we cut $5 million last year and are projecting another $6.5 million over the next handful of years. Of course, those are projections. We know that we can't predict what the next biennium is going to look like from the state, but we do know it looks like it could be a challenge. This is a dollar bill that we show our community often when we talk to them about referendums, because I do know that our community does expect and want us to make sure that we are prioritizing our students and instruction. And so 80 cents on the dollar is invested in students, stuff in front of our students, as well as support for our students. This is really critical and important to our community, making sure that we're being operationally efficient as well as prioritizing students. So the school board decided that we had 3 choices. One was to do nothing and just contain costs to manage our budget. The second was to consider what a mid-level ask would be. One of the things we hear from the community often is that you keep coming out and asking for small portions. So they were just kind of putting a Band-Aid, and we're just saying, this will mean we don't cut anything. And what we're really saying is we want to make some investments in our community and in our schools. And so we're asking for the community to support us at cap. So the legislator says this is the amount of money that you can ask the community for. 742 would bring us to cap. That will be $23 a month for a home. That's $500,000. So in 2019, we went out for a referendum. The one that didn't pass, our median home value was about $350,000. In 21, when we went out for the referendum, our median house value was about $375,000. Well, in 25, our median house value is $500,000. So on a $500,000 house, it would be $23 a month. That is about, in 19, 21, and 25, it's been about $20-ish that we've asked through our referendums. One of the things that I had just a great fortune to do is spend 100 days listening to our community. I have talked to hundreds of students this year and wanting to know what investments our students think that we need. And so if our referendum passes, we know that we'll be able to sustain the high programming that we have inside of our organization. We are able to serve students who are interested, I want to do it like this, are interested in the trades, are interested in woods and auto mechanics, all the way to, I take 8 AP classes because I'm really excited to go to a 4-year school. We have a vast range of opportunities for our students. We want to be able to maintain that. One of the things that our community has really high value in is activities, athletics, the arts. And we have an activities director that focuses on student clubs, on art, speech, debate. That is something that makes ECCS difference. There's hardly any schools in the state that have an investment in that, and our community has a really high value of that. 94% of our students at the high school participate in one activity outside of that bell time. Outside of their classroom. That's such a high percentage of students that are engaging, and I believe it's because we are providing them high quality extracurricular activities that range not just through athletics, but also through the arts and activities. And so that we know that kids that are engaged are more likely to come to school, they have a better sense of belonging, and so we want to maintain that high level programming. Here are a couple things that we also want to invest in that we heard our community talk about. One, we need to enhance our gifted and talented programming, particularly at the elementary level. We've been expanding it at the middle level, and I want to be able to sustain that, and again, sustaining that at the high school. That is a gap that our community continues to tell us that some of our comparable districts have a kind of a lead on us, and we want to make sure that we can do some investing. Our students and our families talk to us a lot about mental health and making sure that we can support the mental health needs of our students. We've added and invested. The legislator gave us a line item that helped us invest in some mental health supports. They pulled some of it back in 25. It was from 23 investment. They pulled a little bit back in 25, and we don't know if we're going to get it in the next biennium, but we did invest in a 5th counselor at both of our high schools so that we can ensure that our students are having more access. What our kids told us is when they need help, they want someone they can go to. And they love their teachers, but they also believe a counselor is someone that can help them with that social emotional piece. And so we've invested in that, and we want to keep that investment. We also had our community talk a lot to us about wanting to enhance our career and college pathways. And so we have done some investing in that and want to continue to do that. So not only do we want to sustain what we have, but we also want to do some investments for our community and make sure that we're meeting the needs of what our community is telling us they think we need to do for the schools. If it's not approved, this is always kind of the doom and gloom part of a referendum, is that there always are things to lose. We have two choices, like I said, revenue, increase revenue or contain cost. And there are just some things on the line that I think really make Eastern Carver County schools different. It meets the values that our community has, such as fifth grade band, that activities director, supports at the kindergarten level. Our community wants small class sizes at that kindergarten level and adding more support around our kinders. Media specialists, many districts have already abandoned that position. We have a high value of that position. It helps our students get access to books, right levels, interest levels that they have, and we've created some commitments to that we would lose. Also, we would have to reduce some of our gifted and talented, and our community is telling us we need more of that. And so these are tough cuts in front of us that we don't want to have to make, because I do think these are some of the pieces that really make Eastern Carver County such a special place, and we want to continue to invest. So the tax impact, and I kind of went through this already, is $23 a month, and we also know that that's the highest we'll ever be because we know our community is growing. One of the things that is happening in Eastern Carver County is we have, a few of our cities are growing quite rapidly, and so as the tax base spreads out, we know that the cost of the vote yes for a referendum will decrease over the course of time. I want to make sure I get this in 10 minutes. I love to talk about this. This graph we often show, and the light blue at the bottom is our operating levy, and the top is the capital projects levy, or what we call often in Eastern Carver County Schools our technology levy. And what this would allow us to do is move up one spot. If we pass, or when we pass the referendum, we'll move ahead of Stillwater. But one of the things that I want to point out to the community here is that these are often districts that are ahead of us that we get compared to quite often. And these districts here have been at cap, that word that I used before, for many years. And what our state has said is if we want excellent schools and great programming, our community has to invest. That is a structural issue, but it is the realities that we have right now. And so we're excited about the opportunity to do that investment in our schools, but I also want to just acknowledge anytime we ask our community members to support us, to spend money, to invest their livelihoods in something, that we have to take it really seriously and want to make sure that we're providing the promise that we're making through the referendum. And so trying to really map that out clearly of what the benefit is and what the reality would be if the referendum did not pass. One of the things here that I just want to point out as well is, like, maybe you're wondering, why does Hopkins have such a big amount of money? They just have more industry than we do, and so the tax burden is shared in the community with industry. It's one of the beautiful things about Eastern Carver County, and it's one of the hard things about Eastern Carver County when we talk about referendums, because it does lay on our homeowners. So voting starts November 4th, and of course, as you all know, mail-in ballots has quadrupled over the last handful of years, and so those things start September 19th. You can vote in person. Thank you. We are going to be at the Victoria Rec Center for this opportunity to vote on November 4th. If we wanted to make sure that the council was informed, that you had information from Eastern Carver County, and also want to make sure that the community knows if they have questions, they can go to our website. There's an email address. We also have a phone line, so you can just leave a voicemail, and we will have a full presentation 2 times for the community that will be lengthier than this and give a full scope of what we're planning on doing, a little bit more about Eastern Carver County Schools. There'll be one in person and one virtually during the day. And so there's plenty of opportunity for us to inform the community. And I just want to acknowledge, the loss of the newspaper is just a challenge to make sure that we are informing people. And one of the commitments that we've continued to make is that our cities, our communities know what's in front of them so that they're informed voters. We're not trying to hide. We want to make sure that we're informing our communities so that they can support us and make an informed decision. So I'm stand for any questions that you have, but I just want to thank you again for the time tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Rathke. Any quick questions for Dr. Rathke? All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to address the council on an item that is not in the agenda and not in application form that will be coming to the council at a future date? All right, seeing no one, we'll move on to the next item, which is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are routine administrative and do not require deliberation or are housekeeping items that are required by law. They're approved with one vote unless someone requests an item to be considered separately. Starting with Ms. Hardy, does staff wish to pull any consent items for separate discussion and vote this evening?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Any members of the council wishing to pull an item from consent, or any members of the audience? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda, please.
Motion to adopt the consent agenda.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to our regular agenda, the first item on our agenda, 6.1, is to consider granting a new cable television franchise to Comcast. Presenting this evening is our IT manager, Eric Schutte. Mr. Schutte, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. On April 28th, Victoria Council held a public hearing to consider applications from Comcast and Midco for cable franchises to provide services in the city. The council directed staff to negotiate with both companies using the existing Midco or Mediacom franchise as a template to ensure consistent terms and conditions among competing vendors. Negotiations focused on key aspects like service area build-out, construction standards, customer service, and financial protections for the city. Comcast has submitted a financial application that we feel is substantially inferior to the city's existing agreement with Mediacom and competing proposal from Midco. Initially, Comcast proposed serving the entire community. However, Comcast reverted to a limited service model. Their current proposal includes several terms that the city finds unacceptable: limited service area, commitment to serve only 2 neighborhoods where they have built infrastructure, unrealistic expansion clauses, and community support. After consideration, staff advises denying the adoption to grant a new cable television franchise agreement to Comcast. I'll stand for any questions. We also have our attorney, Mr. Vos, in the audience, or available as well as Carly from Comcast.
Okay. Councilmember Vos, or Attorney Vos, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, Mayor. Thank you.
Excellent. This is your area of expertise. So we are looking to you to shed some light on this for us, please.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm happy to weigh in on it. Maybe we can start with Carly Warner, Comcast representative is here. I have, my default mode is always, it's fine to hear from applicants. I think you typically proceed that way as well. I do want to, and in this case, Mayor, it's going to be your call on whether you want to hear from Carly or not. There isn't a legal requirement that we continue to hear from the company about this. I just want to point out, for your edification in deciding if you want to hear from Carly, and for council deciding that, you see from the updated report that I've raised this question about sort of when is the input going to stop from Comcast, right? We got some late breaking input shortly prior, a couple days prior to your last council meeting, where this was scheduled to be decided. And that communication raised a new legal issue that we hadn't previously heard about, hadn't been raised before. And I responded to that, as you see in your packet. I responded to that saying, we're going to consider this. We're going to consider this new legal issue that's been raised, but this needs to be it now, right? We can't just have new things being raised right before each meeting where you're going to decide, you, the council, are going to decide what you're going to do with the application. So I have said that to the company in writing in the letters that you see in the packet. So I want to abide by the concept that I've laid out, and whether you want to hear from Carly or not, I want to abide by the concept that we can't continue to hear about new things each decision on the application. So I'd leave it to you. If you do want to hear from Carly, can we just limit it, though, to hearing about a summary of what Comcast believes has been submitted to us? I don't want to hear about new issues at this point. We've said we're not going to hear about new issues. So I guess I'd like you to have my back on that one.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying,
I think that's fair. Ms. Werner, if you would like to address council, please step forward. Please state your name and for the
Good
record.
evening.
And
Yes,
welcome.
my name is Carly Werner. I'm with Comcast Cable Communications. And thank you, Mayor, council members, for hearing from me tonight. I appreciate, Bob, Mr. Vos, what you have laid out here as the guardrails. I will say, though, that I do disagree with your version of events in the fact that I thought what we were doing was negotiating a franchise per the council's instructions last time I was here, and then was told you were going to deny our application. And so when I was going back and forth, I thought we were in a negotiation phase. So forgive me, I did not understand the process that you had laid out. And so I don't believe it was that I was trying to throw new issues. I thought we were trying to get to a solve. But regardless, we are where we are now. And, I just want to say a couple of things. Obviously, I'm here tonight to ask you to reject staff and outside counsel's recommendation that the cable franchise be denied, and ask them to really negotiate a franchise with us. While Comcast is obviously disappointed in the recommendation being made, we are hopeful this matter could still get resolved through further discussion. There are just 2 points I want to make clear, and it's in the back, it's in the letter that we submitted, it's in the packet, so I know you've had a chance to read it, so I just want to pull out and highlight a couple points for this consideration that I'm asking for you tonight. And it's that we at Comcast, we're not asking the city to do anything new or novel or untested in courts. It's a bit confusing, frankly, that we're being treated like we are. As you saw in our response, the FCC has said unambiguously that a city may not deny a cable franchise on the basis that the new entrant will not agree to the exact same franchise terms as the incumbent operator, including build-out. My understanding is that was the major issue here. And I'm happy to answer questions about circumstances around that, but that is the law that is facing us right now. I think it's a well understood principle that state law cannot be applied in a way that would violate federal law. Even putting aside the fact that federal law on this issue is very clear, outside counsel's memo did also not discuss the fact that there was a case in Prior Lake, Minnesota, where the court held that Minnesota state law can be followed while also complying with federal law. And in that case, the incumbent cable operator sued a city that had awarded a franchise on different terms and conditions, again, the build-out issue. And the court explained that the city's action was in compliance with state law and also federal law. I just want you to understand that, because the memo asking you to deny this does not address that. It says that this is a violation of state law, period. And the result, why the FCC had passed these laws and the federal government passed these laws, was to increase and encourage competition. And that is exactly what has happened. That is exactly what has happened. So that's just the second point I want to make real quick, is that all we're asking you to do is allow us to give residents in the areas that we have already constructed the opportunity to choose our traditional cable service if that's what they want. I know that there are a ton of video options. I know a lot of people are cutting the cord. That's kind of the trendy thing to do, but there are still a significant amount of residents, I'm sure in Victoria as well, that prefer to have all their sports and news and movies all in one package, the traditional cable package, and use our, which I believe is a very cutting edge interface and voice remote that we have with it. They would like that option. And certainly I know, we've been working with the developers of Marsh Hollow and Hunters Brook, and they say the same. They would very much obviously prefer that their residents would have the full option from Comcast when they come to our Comcast store that we're about to open in Chanhassen, or folks go door to door to sell, that we can't tell them, sorry, you live in Victoria, you cannot have that particular option. So I just want to say in closing that you saw in the packet most of the legal authority and points raised in the letter from Comcast counsel were not responded to. Regardless, if the city's outside counsel is correct, and adopting a franchise like what Comcast has proposed would violate Minnesota law, then the incumbent provider could demonstrate, per state law, that the terms of their franchise or our franchise is more favorable or less burdensome. Those are the words in state law. More favorable or less burdensome than their current franchise terms. Therefore, I urge this council to allow us to negotiate a franchise. We'll put it out for public comment per regular ordinance process, and the incumbent operator can submit something saying or explaining how they are being harmed or how the terms that we are proposing are more favorable or less burdensome. Because right now it's just conjecture. We're making a lot of assumptions, and I'll tell you, a lot of the assumptions are unreasonable or illogical about how we could be harming incumbent cable operators right now if we're trying to offer service. In fact, the only thing you're probably going to hear from them is they don't want another competitor. So I firmly believe that none of the issues that are laid out for you are insurmountable, and further discussions and an openness to solve them will get us there. Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you,
happy to
Ms.
answer
Werner.
any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Werner?
You say that the point of this is competition, right? But really, you're only wanting competition in two neighborhoods. Like, we want competition. We want you to compete in the whole city. That's what we're asking. But you're actually not wanting to compete in the whole city. You're wanting to compete in two neighborhoods. So I guess what would you say to that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, and that's fair. And I'm telling you, nobody wanted to build the entire city of Victoria more than we did. And we came in as Comcast, and this is in the record, and asked for the city to open the RFP process for a franchise. We discussed with staff many times that would be our preference, is to build the whole city, not knowing that Midco was going to also come. We had certainly known that MetroNet had made their intentions clear, and could understand how we could kind of build around MetroNet, eventually compete, of course, but the build schedule itself. But then Midco just started moving very fast and furious, and I don't think Kara's here, but really what happened was we were starting to have significant issues in the right-of-way. You heard that was in the record when we stood in front of you in the public hearing in April. That had started to become making itself apparent. Those issues just got more amplified, and so what we asked for was the slowdown, and what we're proposing is a model around, and frankly we had to take some of those crews that were working because the city of Victoria asked us to slow down and move them to Chanhassen and Waconia and other cities that we are fully building. And what we're asking in this application then was the slowdown, right? And we said, if we hit these certain standards, we'll come back and build more. And if you see the franchise application, it's in your packet, you'll see that. But frankly, the circumstances changed. The issues got very insurmountable, and it was we were the ones, I'll tell you, who were more disappointed than anyone that the circumstances changed so fast.
Okay.
I just have a question for staff. Did we not have Comcast and Midco present to us in the same evening as to why they like Victoria, that they want to serve the market, that they're interested in building out?
Yes, council member. On April 28th, they both had presented to council about franchise and building that out. Was that your question?
Yes, and thank you for answering.
And Mayor and Council, if I can, at this point, just weigh in. You'd asked me sort of I want to.
Hang on just a second. Ms. Warner, you can go ahead and take a seat. If you're going to
Thanks.
hang around here, we'll call you back.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you listening to me, and like I said, we have built, we had to pivot. The question really is, what we do with those residents now. So thank you.
Thanks. All right, very good. Attorney Bose.
Yeah, Mayor and Council members, I appreciate Ms. Warner sort of doing what I had requested, which is sort of sticking to the things that are in front of us, and I think her comments did that nicely. So I was going to touch on several things, but maybe it would be most useful if I sort of use the comments she provided to you to sort of parlay off of that, rather than sort of following my own framework. So I think there's sort of three things that I want to respond to fairly quickly. First is the negotiate issue. And you see from the staff report and from my memo that there's sort of two things that cities are asked to look at when they consider granting a franchise to a cable operator, and in particular a competitive franchise like Comcast is looking for. Two things are the company's qualifications. There isn't an issue about that. Comcast is obviously qualified to provide cable TV services. They do it all over the country. They're the biggest, I think, in the country, and so there's no issue about that. The other question, though, that cities need to look at is, in Minnesota in particular, does the competitor's franchise proposal, do the terms that they're willing to accept comply with state law, and do they make sense? I mean, it's both does it make sense? You have to make a policy decision about whether it makes sense to you. And you also have to make a decision about do the terms they're willing to accept comply with state law. And so Carly makes the right point about, we wanted to negotiate about that. And I want to respond to that. And this is a little bit down in the weeds about that, but I think that's where that takes us a little bit. And that is that, Comcast made their initial application saying they were going to build out the whole city. They then made a choice. I mean, Ms. Warner makes it sound like they were forced by the fact that another company applied. That's, of course, not correct. They just made a choice to not elect to go forward with competing everywhere. They don't want to do that because they don't think it serves their economic interests. And so when that happened, they made a proposal to us that was different, materially different than what their application suggested, building out the whole city. And we, the staff and I, found their proposal to not comply with state law. State law, again, statutorily prohibits this city from granting a franchise to a competitor in the cable TV market if the franchise that competitor wants would be more beneficial or less burdensome to that competitor than the city's franchise with Mediacom and now with Midco. State law prohibits us from granting that franchise, flatly prohibits it, okay? And so we saw that the proposal that the company was willing to accept would not meet that standard. It is clear, and I spell out the reasons why in the report. I would say, Ms. Warner says I didn't respond to certain things they've raised. I'm not going to argue about that, but I've said several times now in writing to you in documents that the company has that their proposal clearly does not comply with the state level playing field requirement. There is no response to that at all. I don't think that's actually debatable. The idea that a company would only build out 2 neighborhoods in the face of an existing franchise, or in this case, 2 franchises that require build out everywhere, effectively everywhere, I mean, that's clearly not equally burdensome or beneficial. It's not. And so there isn't really a debate about that. But Ms. Warner's point is, well, we wanted to negotiate some more about that. The reality is this, I just said to her, this is informal and I hate to get down into the weeds, but that's what this calls for. I just said back, I don't have any direction to come back with anything in particular. If you, company, Comcast, would like to propose something else that gets us closer to compliance with state law, something closer in terms of burdensomeness or benefits, feel free to go ahead, and that didn't happen. There was not, the proposal is what it is, in other words. So it's fair to say we didn't negotiate, but it's because the city just said, well, you're very, very far away from compliance with state law here. We're not going to start from that standpoint, right? We're not going to start from something that's clearly not acceptable under state law. Give us something else, and there isn't anything else. And I will tell you, my view is the Comcast is not in a position to commit to building out your whole city, and is not in a position to commit to a different arrangement that would cause them to build out your whole city. What they propose is serving 2 neighborhoods and then potentially building out only if they're very, very successful in those 2 neighborhoods. I think that's the end of the story on that issue. So that's the negotiate issue. It's a fair point to say we thought we were going to negotiate, but that's the inside baseball about what actually happened on the issues that were presented to the city staff. So that's one point. The second point is what I've already said. The suggestion here is that because neither Midco or Mediacom have objected to the franchise proposal, a franchise proposal, by the way, that was just emailed to us. I mean, it's not like it was made public in some sense, but that because they haven't objected to that franchise proposal, that's the test somehow under state law. If nobody objects, then the city can do it. That, again, is just legally incorrect. That is not what state law says. The fact that an incumbent may not be aware of the terms that are being proposed or may not have objected to those terms doesn't change what the statute says, which is that cities can't grant more beneficial terms to a competitor than the incumbent has. It's a flat statutory prohibition against the city doing that. So it's not relevant who has said what from Midco or from Mediacom. What matters is what the statute says. And then last point is, and I guess to be fair, Ms. Werner didn't raise this, but I think you understand from the documents that are in front of you that this is a core issue that's been in play, is that, well, she did make the point. The point being that other cities have found ways to grant franchises that provide a competitor with a somewhat different service area build-out obligation than the incumbent has. They've provided a case to us that they think reflects an example of that. But what they've told us all along is with the proposal they've made, it mirrors what CenturyLink, a big incumbent phone company around the state of Minnesota, what CenturyLink did in Minneapolis and St. Paul and Bloomington and Burnsville, which is CenturyLink made a proposal for a build-out in those communities that was somewhat different than Comcast. Comcast was the incumbent provider in those cities. They made a proposal for a franchise build-out obligation that was somewhat different than Comcast, and a number of cities approved that, granted that. I have said in the report all of the ways in which the CenturyLink build-out proposal and the CenturyLink ultimate obligations are entirely different than what's being proposed here. And I'm not going to go through all of those, but the most obvious is just what has already been brought out. Comcast is prepared to commit to serving 2 neighborhoods out of all of the neighborhoods in your community. What CenturyLink was proposing to do and was approved to do was serve a very, very large percentage of those communities where it was looking for a competitive franchise. Not 100%. Comcast, I think, is correct was correct in saying in those communities, we effectively serve 100% of Minneapolis, or just about 100% of Minneapolis. CenturyLink's proposal wasn't to serve 100% initially, but it was to serve a very, very large percentage of Minneapolis. That's apples and oranges to what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is, again, Councilmember, 2 neighborhoods with no meaningful commitment to build beyond that. That's just not the same thing as what CenturyLink was proposing. And I'll just say it again, because it's said in my initial report, my letter back to Carly and to Comcast, and in my follow-up report, but it's never been responded to. The proposal that's been made to us does not comply with state law, or it's extraordinarily likely that a court would find, if we ever got there, that it doesn't comply with state law, for the reason I just said again. It's just too different and too much less onerous than the obligation to build out the entirety of the city. So I'll stop there. I think I've covered what I wanted to cover, and I think that's responsive to Ms. Werner's comments.
I have a question for you. If we deny this, if we deny this current proposal, or agreement, is it, can we continue negotiating?
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, that's actually happened. That situation has occurred. There are precious few. There are a few, but there are a precious few cities that have been put in a position where they've denied a competitive cable franchise. Again, there have been a few, but what you're describing, Mayor, has occurred where initially a competitor has come in and made proposals that would not comply with state law or were objectionable for other reasons, and have ultimately gone back to the drawing board and come back with different proposals. That can be done. I think, I don't want to sort of go on record about exactly procedurally how we would do that, but certainly there is nothing in state law nor in your local law that would now prevent Comcast from making a different proposal, whether it needs to be a whole new application process or we can somehow sort of waive a new fee, or, there are procedural things that maybe we need to work through, but theoretically the company, if you deny tonight, can still make a different proposal later and is not prohibited from doing that by a denial.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Yep.
Council, any questions for Bob, Ms. Warner on this item?
I mean, it's not a question, I guess, but it feels so, we've talked about how they had their original application that was going to be the whole city. But before that, my understanding is that they talked to city staff and asked about initially just doing 2 neighborhoods. And we said, no, that doesn't comply with state law. We need to build out the whole thing. So that's when they came back and said, okay, we'll do it. We'll file the application for the whole city, but now we're back to 2 neighborhoods. It just feels, might not have been the intent, but what it looks like is trying to work around the system, right? Like, we couldn't get our 2, we'll say we're gonna do this, and now we're gonna try and backtrack and get just our 2 neighborhoods. And then, Comcast is a billion-dollar company, and it feels a little big company trying to bully the city type thing, in my opinion. So, and to be honest, we've had lots of issues with them. We constantly got calls, right? So about issues in neighborhoods of, other lines being broken, driveways being ruined, and we haven't really had those issues since Comcast has had to stop. So I think there's a lot of reasons for denying this.
So the one thing that I want to say is I would, on the level playing field, Mediacom and Midco have committed to building out our whole city. And I feel like from a standpoint, they're making the investment. I'd love to see Comcast do the very same thing, just so to level the playing field on the market for our residents. It would be great if all of our residents had all the choices for cable services. So I'm leaning towards denying this based on that level. Other comments?
I just have a question for Bob on the question of the FCC arguments cited. My read of that seems to view that the locus of that is not necessarily that federal law supersedes state law on this. It was a question about what is a reasonable viewpoint of a city to take about how the build out takes place, and that it would be unreasonable to say, do a build out so that you're ready in 4 months. Do a build out so that you're ready in 12 months. Reasonableness feels like that was the nexus of why those decisions were made, and that if there was a full commitment to the entire existing area, that it would be unreasonable to say, deliver that tomorrow to anybody who calls. Is that the correct view of what the FCC was trying to get to in that space?
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, I actually had that written down. That was my fourth point, but I failed to bring it up, so I apologize. I'm glad you steered me back to the other point, because obviously that was the focus of Ms. Werner's original communication, and then the follow-up from Corporate Counsel. So the very, very short summary, before I get to your point, Council Member, the very, very short summary is that the argument raised was that if you deny this franchise, that is contrary to the FCC's order. And of course, I responded saying, the way lawyers do in 2 pages, in effect, what I said was, show me where in the FCC order it says that Minnesota state law is preempted. Where is it that Minnesota law no longer applies to Victoria? And the answer back was, yeah, it still applies. So, that's obviously a summary of the back and forth, but that's the back and forth. The FCC order does not preempt, does not invalidate the state law that we're talking about here. The state law still applies to us. We still have to comply with it, period. So, to your point, Council Member, yes, if you go past that, the fact that the FCC orders don't dictate anything here, if you go past that and you dive into the details of the FCC orders, what they say is exactly what you said. Cities should not cause build-outs to have to occur instantly. Cities should not be unreasonable in the way they impose those build-outs. And one of the examples given in the FCC order is, don't be unreasonable, cities, and say to a new competitor, sorry, I'm lost my voice. Don't say to a new competitor, you must build out our city much, much faster than the incumbent was required to do it. Don't say to a competitor, you must build out more of the city than the incumbent does. And if you do have a build out in the incumbent's franchise, don't make the build out obligation be more strenuous on the competitor than the incumbent. And of course, we're doing none of that, right? Minnesota state law doesn't require us to do any of that. And the staff and I have not attempted to do any of that. We are literally attempting to say to Comcast, we want you to build out in the same way over time, and only in neighborhoods where there are sufficient homes to justify it. We want you to build out the way Midco is now going to build out and the way Mediacom has in the past. So putting aside the fact that the FCC order doesn't dictate anything here, what we're doing isn't out of compliance with the FCC order. So, it's sort of, it's bumps that spike kind of thing. It's not, it doesn't cause you to have to rethink your direction here.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, anything else?
No, go ahead.
That's the biggest thing for me, is just the build out in the 2 neighborhoods, and so different from Midco and Mediacom, and that's the difficult part for me, definitely.
All right, very good. All right, Council, at this point, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to deny adoption, granting a new cable television franchise to Comcast of Arkansas, Louisiana, Minnesota, Mississippi, Tennessee, LLC.
We have a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda, 6.2, is the Victoria Condos Mixed-Use Development Sketch Plat. Presenting this evening is City Planner Brian McCann. Mr. McCann, have a seat and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. Give me just a moment here to boot up my presentation for everyone. Great. Yes, we have a sketch plat prepared by Monarch Development and submitted to the city for consideration for a mixed-use development proposal. So no approvals or actions are to be taken during this meeting. It's just to provide guidance to the applicant as they work for preliminary plat and other future potential land use applications. So looking at the location and area, there are 3 parcels totaling 0.63 acres. There is the city parking lot, as well as another portion of city parking lot in a L-shaped piece here, which is also owned by the city, and then the private garage building located at 7942 Quamaclit. Really, the project area is going to be limited to 0.32 acres centered around this building. That information will come into play later when we talk about density, But location-wise, it is located right in the heart of our downtown. So it's west of Clomaclitty, east of Randy's Way, south of Vicks and Steiger Lake Lane, and then north of the Borough and Tower Boulevard. With this mixed-use building, they are proposing 10 condo units as well as 2 ground floor commercial units and 1 ground floor private storage or use for collector vehicles. So the existing conditions, as I mentioned, there is an existing private garage storage building with access to Quamaclit currently. There's the existing city parking lot, which has a total of 43 stalls in it right now. There are utilities available along Quamaclit and Tower Boulevard, and it is also within 1,000 feet of Steiger Lake, so the shoreline district comes into play. This was previously reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council in 2022. Their previous concept included 63 apartment units with the same ground floor commercial storage showroom concept. Just a note about that, there was some misinformation that spread in the community regarding the parking generated and resulting impacts to residents and businesses, as well as a distortion of the maximum building height or the number of stories that were presented with that concept. So the applicant has worked with members of the community and has come back with a revised concept for consideration by the Planning Commission and City Council. On the left is what was proposed in 2022 with those with the balconies, as you can see, and then here on the image on the right is the proposed condo concept with just a few balconies, but still retaining that ground floor commercial space. So if we break this down floor by floor, under the building is a proposed private parking garage consisting of 20 parking spaces. Then moving up to the ground floor is where those commercial units come into play here. Each of them are just over 2,000 square feet in size, as well as some modifications to the existing city parking lot. What they would do is close off the entrances onto Quamaclit Street, and then it would be one way in and back out onto Randy's Way for the development. Then moving up to the second and third levels, that would be for the condo units, 4 units per floor. So 8 of the 10 units between levels 2 and 3. They're all 2-bedroom concepts. The smallest is about 1,400 square feet in size, moving up to 2,200 square feet. And then the final top floor would be those final 2 condo units, as well as an amenity and roof deck for the residents. They did provide some renderings from various elevations as well for consideration. So here is the view from the south. Here's Tower Boulevard for reference with a few parallel parking spaces in front. The ground floor commercial, that amenity deck that was presented on the last slide. And then how the residents would access the building is for this entrance off of Randy's Way. And then the parking garage entrance would also be located here, also shown in the image in the bottom right, going underneath the building for the residents. So our comprehensive plan guides this property as downtown mixed use, which allows 24 to 75 units per acre. It also envisions this type of development with mixed use retail office on the ground floor and high density residential up above. The proposed density comes out to 31.25 units per acre, which is within that range. So those 10 units on that 0.32 acres that I mentioned earlier. And so a comprehensive plan amendment is not anticipated at this time because it does fall within the allowed density range. For the zoning, it is zoned central business district, which allows mixed use buildings with a conditional use permit. Our district also allows various commercial uses with a conditional use permit. So depending on what moves into those commercial spaces, additional CUPs may be required. We expect to review the mixed-use building specifically with a CUP approval consideration at preliminary plat. For the amenity deck on the top floor, if they have like a swimming pool, for instance, that's an accessory conditional use in our code, so that would require an additional CUP. But really, we don't have any bulk standards, so no setbacks, no minimum sizes, things like that in our CBD. So the only thing we'd be looking at is height. We have a maximum height requirement of 50 feet. They are proposing 49 feet. And then what that looks like in terms of scale with our existing downtown buildings, it's just slightly smaller than the Victoria Flats building currently is in relation to grade and comparison. So for the streets and pedestrian connections, as I mentioned, they would be closing 2 of those access points on Quamaclet for the modifications to the city parking lot. The 2 accesses on Randy's Way would remain. Just one would be in and the other would be out. The underground parking would come from Randy's Way, and then they are proposing concrete sidewalks outlined in red throughout the entire site. There's not a sidewalk on this side of Quamaclet right now. As you may have seen, we have people walk in the street or in parking spaces to get down to Vic's, so that's a much needed amenity that is proposed with this concept.
Can you back up one quick second?
Yes,
Do
absolutely.
we lose those parking spaces, with those extra, yeah, that little bump out, we lose those parking spaces with this?
Correct. Mayor, they are proposing to make some adjustments to our city parking lot, resulting in a loss of these 5 spaces here. They are proposing on taking out the existing evergreen trees that are located here and adding some additional stalls to account for that. I'll cover parking in a later slide to talk about overall net increase to parking for this development. Continuing with the streets and pedestrian connections, the fire department has requested in the review memo that was attached to the case that we do have one more access retained on Quamaclet for the parking lot, which may impact some of the parking counts proposed by the applicant. Additionally, engineering requested clarification on parking stall layout with size functionality. So that's something that will have to be analyzed later, as well as the dimensions and the curb adjustments on Tower Boulevard to make this parallel parking work. We expect those to be addressed in preliminary plat with future conversations with staff. So looking at parking, I'm going to break this down in 2 ways because I know parking is a very controversial topic in our downtown. So starting with what we have right now. As I mentioned, the city parking lot has 43 stalls currently. The total parking proposed with this is 86 stalls. So that includes those 20 underground stalls, all of the parking modifications in the city lot, new parking along Quamaclet and Tower Boulevard, 86 stalls. What that means is there is a net increase of 23 public parking stalls in total. So we take that 86, the new, minus what we have, 43, minus the 20 underground inaccessible public or private parking stalls. That's how we end up with 23. Then separately, looking at that total parking, again, going back to 86 stalls, taking away those 20 private stalls, that leaves 66 public available stalls. When we calculate the required retail uses, which are anticipated for these 2 commercial spaces, they need 15 stalls per our code. So 66 minus 15, we still have 51 public parking stalls available. The private showroom or garage use here only needs 1 parking stall per our code. So we get a net increase of 23 parking stalls, but actually we have 50 stalls available for public parking with all uses accounted for with this proposed development.
Can we pause it for just a moment there?
Yes.
So if what we'll just affectionately at this point call the showroom, which pursuant to what we have here requires one stall. If that changes to essentially the same retail space in the future, there's still enough net addition to park that space for that use. Is that a fair statement?
Mayor and council member, that's correct. What that would result in is another 7 stalls for consideration, 7 or 8. So that would bring those 50 public stalls down to 43 or 42.
Which is essentially what we have today.
Correct.
Fair?
Yes.
So net. Just make the presumption that the showroom is no longer the showroom, that it, becomes a retail space. By the time this is all said and done, we lose 0 parking spaces of what we have currently today. Is that a fair statement?
Mayor and council members, that's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions on parking?
Yeah, just one on the underground parking, 20 stalls, let's average out 2 per unit, right? How about for like visitors with the, are they required to park outside in a visitor lot, or what are you thinking for that? Or even along those lines, like liveries and that kind of thing, what's your plan with that?
Mr. Runk,
Hi,
welcome.
Members of the council, Carl Runk with Monarch. I just want to state that my co-developer on this pursuit is Gagne Homes. They're active in Victoria, and so they're not involved in downtown West, but here only. But regarding your question on visitor parking, we believe some of these units will not always use 2 stalls, and so they're likely in reality be 1 or 2 stalls available for that purpose if someone has a guest. So we're still early on, but that's something we're certainly looking at as far as in the garage is preferable if someone's a guest there overnight instead of being outside.
Okay.
Mr. Runk, are these proposed to be condos for owner rental? Do you have that level of detail yet?
Yes, these are designed as owner-occupied residences because there's been, since this was proposed in 2022, of course, a lot of new rental apartments that have been built or under construction now in downtown Victoria. So these are just 10, 2-bedroom of different size owner-occupied condos.
And that was one of my questions too, Carl. So 10 2-bedroom, just different size 2-bedroom is the difference between the 1,400 and 2,200.
Yeah, we were thinking that people facing north Steiger Lake, looking down at the lake views would pay a premium and therefore want larger units at 2,200 square feet. And still have a nice view with sunlight facing south and the community that way. Those are slightly smaller, 1,400 square feet.
Thank you.
Just to muddy the waters, the public parking that we have in what I'll call inside the flats, which is right outside, we have public spaces there. Do we allow overnight parking in those spaces?
Mayor and council members, yes, I believe we do. Getting nods from city manager. Yes, so that is a private parking lot with a public agreement, I believe, to allow guests or users of the downtown business area to park there, including overnight guests for the Victoria Flats.
Okay, and as such, those are public spaces. Maybe I'm going to go out on a ledge, but some of that has been financed by TIF.
Correct.
So would those be available to overnight guests of this new development, or would that be off limits?
It's mayor and council member. I'm not quite sure I have an answer to that.
And we don't have to have an answer today. And we're at Sketchplat. We can
I was
kind of
gonna
just
say, it's
ruminate
public
about
parking,
that.
so
It's public
it could be
parking.
overnight because we don't prohibit overnight parking.
I'm not sure how they would determine residents and guests and ownership of vehicles, so I would assume it's all public and available to use for any.
Ms. Hardy, is that clear?
Thank you. Mayor, members of the council, I agree with Mr. McCann in his comments, but just to be safe, we would probably just want to look at that use agreement just to make sure that there isn't any restrictions related to that.
Very good. I am curious about these parking spaces on Quamoklit. Does that turn Quamaclet into a one-way. That feels like there's not enough room there.
Mayor and council member, our engineering staff did look at the parking and the width of Quamaclet Street, and they didn't seem to have any concerns about making that a one-way. I think they believe they can make it work with a two-way still.
Okay.
I think it's hard to visualize, Mayor, because we've just been so used to the scene the way it is for so long. But there is a very large apron of concrete that sits between the front of the existing building now and the street, and then the island, what I'll call islands, at the end of the existing parking lot seem pretty sizable. So that I get what you're saying, but I think the math
works.
The math feels like that works. But can we query the developer at this point, or do you still want to finish your presentation?
That's fine if we want to keep asking questions now.
I mean, I think I have. Let's finish, and then we can go into.
Carl, why don't you take a seat here for a couple minutes, and we'll get you back. Thanks.
Okay. Continuing on, looking at landscaping and tree preservation. So they'll need to supply boulevard trees every 35 feet, place 20 feet away from intersections for vision clearance. They'll have to place foundation plantings where practical. Side note that our CBD is exempt from open space and minimum planting requirements, so we will not be evaluating those with further submittals. And then we will look at tree preservation here for those evergreens that I mentioned earlier that will be replaced with proposed parking. So we expect that over 20% will be removed. So those additional landscaping will have to be considered for incorporation with future submittals. Then looking at the Shoreland Overlay District, this property is entirely within 1,000 feet of Steiger Lake, which is a recreational development lake. That requires a 150-foot ordinary high water line setback. They're about 400 feet away from the lake, so they're completely fine there. And then our shoreland requires a maximum 80% impervious in our central business district. So what is existing out there for the site currently exceeds that 80%. So it's a non-conforming use, but when you change a non-conforming use, like the applicant is proposing with a new structure, that non-conformity goes away. So how do we resolve this 80% maximum impervious? A variance could be considered since that's what's existing out there today. What we would want to see basically is no net increase in stormwater use because that's what the impervious standard is trying to control. So that's something we'll have to evaluate further with a potential variance application in the future. Then residential shoreland planned unit developments, or RSPUDs, are required for buildings more than 4 units per acre, or for just 4 units, my apologies. Within the shoreland area, that requires a density tier analysis and a minimum open space requirement, but we did have an exemption built into our code a few years ago, if you remember the shoreland ordinance that came in for the central business district. A development in our central business district is exempt from RSPUDs if they're not providing riparian access, if they're consistent with the density range in the comp plan, and they're consistent with the other requirements in the shoreland district. So if that variance, for example, is approved, they would be compliant with all 3 of these standards, and they would be exempt from that tier analysis and open space requirement. If they did have to go through a tier analysis, I don't think 10 units would be larger than their allowable unit count, just for reference, but the open space requirement of 50% would be difficult to meet for this development. So for signage, lighting, and architecture, signage and lighting will be evaluated at preliminary plat. They have some wall signage shown, and then lighting will probably be pretty similar to what we have existing in our downtown currently, but something we'll have to evaluate further. They also did provide some renderings which seem to meet all of our design standards of our central business district, including those building breaks to provide some variation, the altered roof designs, enhanced entries, and some high quality exterior materials. For parkland dedication, this would generate a fifth of an acre required, or a cash fee of $21,000. I provide the ratio here based on our code requirements, and for mixed-use buildings, we have to consider the residential component and the commercial component and combine them. But commercial projects less than an acre are exempt, so take that out of the calculation here. They are not proposing any parks or trails based on the submittals provided. Part of that being because we have great amenities in our downtown already. So any additional parkland here is not necessary. Looking at grading and stormwater management, they have to meet the MCWD rules. There aren't any existing wetlands on the site, so we don't expect that to be an issue here. And then the stormwater facilities rely on that downtown regional stormwater that we have. So the city engineer in the review memo did request some further details and evaluation on the drainage and storm sewer allocations for this site. And then I mentioned earlier that utilities are available. So water is available on Quamaclit, and our fire department, I believe, requested an additional hydrant near the building for this, and our engineering just wants to look at potential uses for the water usage of the building, and that sewer is available on Quamaclit and Tower Boulevard. So they have two potential options for connection, but they are proposing a connection to Tower Boulevard. This was brought to the Plan Commission for feedback last week. They were generally supportive of the concept. Some of the discussion revolved around, surprisingly, parking, and then a lot about the architecture and historical elements. And I believe in my staff report I had noted that this was a prior firehouse. It actually was not. I was informed by Assistant City Manager Alyssa this morning that that was not the case. It was actually a beverage bottling facility and distribution facility, so my apologies for that error in the report. They also had a lot of discussion about traffic flow and how that would affect our existing downtown public streets, as well as the reorientation of the city parking lot, the private storeroom or showroom storage use, and how snow removal would work with this development. With that, just a reminder that there's no action required this evening. I have a few questions on the screen to guide discussion. I can answer any questions you may have, as well as the representative from Monarch Development.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. So the fire department said they still wanted access to that parking lot off of Quamaclit. So does that impact the parking numbers then?
Mayor and council members, that's correct. Going back to our parking slide here, they noted they wanted an additional access to Quamaclit here. For example, if it comes through here, that could impact 2, maybe 3, 4 stalls at the most on Quamaclit, and they only want 1. So I would expect at the most a maximum parking impact of what they're showing here to be 4 stalls.
With that, so on the other side, on the Randy's Way side, right, one way is an in and the other way is an out. So would that be so you're going around, if we added the one, would that be an either, or would it be wide enough for an either or type thing? Like you could get out, but you could also go in there?
That's something we'd have to look at. In that situation I just mentioned with an impact to 4 stalls, that would probably be a entrance and exit situation. If it's just exit, that would probably only impact 2 to 3 stalls at the most. But that's something the developer and staff will have to look at closer.
And we'll look at that. And I do want to mention, I've met with the neighboring owners, Terry Hartman and Mary Mavis, and Tom Palmquist today, and 3 other times in the last year and a half. And as of today, Terry Hartman is requesting that we look at Quamaclit further south between Borough and Old National Bank. And so I think that is something working with staff we could explore if there's additional stalls to be gained on Quamaclit that direction. And I also want to state that we are going to be working with them on a joint application for expanding the downtown TIFs district for public parking purposes or other infrastructure that they're proposing.
And my other question is, this is actually a 4-story building, but you're saying because of the way the grade is, that it actually won't stick up any further than the flats?
Correct, yeah. And it's actually, if you see in this diagram, it's shorter 3 stories on the Winchester and Rye side in Randy's Way to make it feel more relatable to the Clock Tower building and Winchester and Rye. And also serves a purpose, as you see, for a amenity deck for the residents to have great views and a little club space. And then 2 condos on the east side facing Victoria Flats, but just slightly shorter than Victoria Flats in height.
So the tallest point there is 49 feet
49 feet
towards
on
the
east
flats on the east side, yep.
Yep.
Yep. That's good to hear that you're talking with other business owners and things on parking and being creative on that side of it. I think the question was asked, does this fit? And personally, I think this fits pretty good into this spot. We looked at 2022 versus this, and it's night and day. So I like the looks of this. The one question I had, too, is on the amenity deck. I assume that's kind of an outdoor-indoor type half and half you're thinking of?
Yes.
Like a club, yeah.
Yeah, that'd
With they can sit out and look at the great views, but yet maybe a club room, like you said, or something?
Exactly, yeah, 'cause
Okay.
getting to know the owners and manager of Victoria Flats, that's the most popular amenity in that building is the rooftop deck and the indoor space.
Yeah.
They wish they would have made it bigger. And so we're trying to make this in a smaller way what that is on Victoria Flats.
Great, thank you.
I just have a couple questions. One of the things in the previous iterations of this that we've heard from some of the downtown business owners, and I know, like you said, that you've been in contact with them, is, they would love to see a parking deck at some point on the public spot. Is that feasible with the way you are designing and building this current?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, so the outline we have now does accommodate what that group came up with Walker Parking Consultants as a proposed design for a 1-story deck with an entrance off Quamaclet at the top and then an entrance off Randy's Way. So it does accommodate that.
Okay.
So if there is a TIF scenario here where we're joint applicants, we're open to building that at the same time if that works out. If it's $1.5 million, we don't know what it costs today, but if it's $1.5 million single level parking deck and the city would support that use, it could make sense to dig a hole at one time and build the parking at one time like that.
What's your plan for construction if all this goes on according to plan? When do you expect to be?
It's dependent really on the lender we select with Gagne. Again, their relationships is who I'm leaning on for this version of it, in terms of how many pre-sales they'll need. Their realtors have already been talking to, they know a lot of homeowners in the community already that are interested, and Mr. Gannon himself might be interested as well. And so if we have some pre-sales, it might be already end this year that we would want to start. If not, it'd push in the spring, most likely.
Your entry into the underground garage, is that a two-way, like they can get in and out? Is it a one-way and you kind of have to, how big is that entry?
It's wide enough to be a two-way.
Okay.
I don't, if you could see the dimension, Brian, but it's meant to be wide enough for 2 vehicles to go across each other in and out.
Okay.
I mean, with only 20 vehicles, it's unlikely to happen very often, but it's meant to be wide enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then my only other question is, I know, again, in the last iteration of this, there was concern about if the residential space, or sorry, not the residential, the commercial space, what if all of a sudden they decide to put a restaurant in there? And I think previously you're like, we don't really want to do that because of smells for our residents and stuff like that. But, I guess, because you'd need obviously more parking if it was a restaurant. Is there, any way we can work that into like whatever, like that this won't have, a restaurant ever?
The concept we have on this project is we're selling out the condos in levels 2 through 4. Gagne and I would sell those out, and the HOA takes over. Rich Gannon would own the first floor. So upon completion, he owns the first floor and would find 2 tenants for the spaces. And so up until, the last iteration, he was open to having a restriction on that because we haven't, for example, put in a duct through the building for restaurant ventilation.
Yep.
So we've not designed it for that. It's really designed for just, retail uses that would not be restaurants. Driving more traffic, of course, like a restaurant would.
Well, whatever those uses are, you're going to have to be able to park it within the requirements that you've given us here. So,
Yeah.
so if you come up with a restaurant that you can't park, we have to say we have to find a different spot for that.
When my more is like in the future, right? Like,
Yeah.
if,
But they- in the future, they still have to park.
no, right, but we've seen in other instances around, in the community where that doesn't always happen, right? So we've given whether it's previous councils, right? Like they've allowed, other buildings to get away with not having adequate parking. So it's just a concern that was brought up. So I wanted to talk about it at least.
And
And I don't think
Rich
that's
should
the
Mr.
plan.
Should be open to that again, so we can move ahead on this further. Like,
Yep.
it's been 3 years since he's talked to tenants at that time, and I don't know if those tenants are still available, but they were not restaurants. They were complimentary to what's downtown in
Yep.
that case.
Other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of like maybe want to kick some ideas. And it's sort of like throwing the baby Ruth bar in the pool, which Carl's a big Caddyshack fan, so that's the reference. So the ramp going into the side of the building, is that still going to be on the city's parcel?
Yes. Rich, again, wanted me to remind everyone on this version of the proposal that he sold the flag-shaped parcel, which is a really small parcel, to the city for parking, I think 10 years ago or so. The city your staff would know when. Is that our proposal to make this fit would be to replat it so the project is including that to make room here for the garage to go down. If there was a scenario where there was a one-level parking deck the city supported, we could reorient that entrance ramp to be within the garage. If you've seen my Excelsior project, you go through the public garage to get into a separate door for the residents. So that could be the case if that were to come to fruition before preliminary plat. So that could change the orientation of that ramp if that were the case.
Well, I'm kind of thinking about like somewhat distant future, and I think that it's been pretty well established that certainly this council wants additional parking to come from development, and if we were going to, for lack of a better expression, give up the parking lot, we would want development there and not a parking ramp. So towards that concept, one thought that looking at this that came into my mind, and I don't know if it's feasible, but would we be able to establish an alley that goes from Quamaclip to Randy's Way, and that it is all more or less level? And then I don't have a lot of heartburn about maybe having what has now been lowered in the front come up a little bit so that the entrance into the parking for the building can come at alley level rather than being scooped out, and then still put the parking spaces for now in the alleyway, but you would then have essentially the alley coming into the building. And then later, if there comes a project that can say, we'll develop this parking lot into some sort of, developed parking lot, that then that alley could serve coming into the backside of whatever goes there. And the alley would then be the way that both buildings would be served by an entrance. So we do away with this scooping out and locking the use to that exclusive ramp into perpetuity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the challenge of that might be the grades, or how do you park the condo residents with the grades of the retail showing up on tower? That might be a little bit of a challenge to park, in terms of elevations that way. That scenario, you're suggesting an alley behind.
I'm suggesting an alley, but for the time being, those 6 parking spots where the trees are they live in the alley. Like, we don't today build it as an alley, but we plot for an alley that when future development comes, then that alley could be like reconstituted to a full alley that would serve both of these buildings. And I hear what you're saying with the grades, but you like, I don't have a lot of heartburn about, the front of this building becoming a little bit taller so that even though the alley might be sloped, that the entrance to the garage comes in off of the alley.
Yeah, right, the retail will be up a bit, yeah, and the alley comes down a bit, and they're able to come off an alley condition that way.
Yeah. And then later, because we would, in that future development, look to add parking spaces that would restore the spaces that would be lost by the entry into the alley from Quamaclet. Kind of see where I'm going with
So future, you're saying the future building potentially.
the future building and this building would both be served by an alley. Granted, the alley might be sloped, but you would essentially raise the front height of this building so that you could come in at almost street level, alley-wise, into your parking garage. And then the future building would, have the back of it there, and it could be served by the same alley to however it would need to take into consideration. Would it be directly across from that door? Maybe. Would it be from the door would be closer to Quamaclet? Possibly. But I think if we scoop this out, fill it with concrete, and make a ramp, that's it. There's nothing else that's going to go there for time eternal. And I have less heartburn about the front of this building being lower. I could, see it coming up a bit. And I would even be comfortable with a rooftop deck that, sits up top of this and has, an even better view out into Steiger Lake from up there. And maybe that gives you a little bit room to maybe add one more unit into the condo complex, but that means that you're going to have 2 more parking spaces that you'll need underground. These are just kind of some food for thought ideas that, it's like pulling on a sweater, right? You pull on the string and you have to rethink a whole bunch of things, but.
Including in our case, selling condos that the future buyers are sophisticated. They're going to ask, okay, what's the city going to do with this lot someday or ramp? Right. And they're going to ask that question. So we just want to, we'll consider that too. I mean, I think what you're saying makes sense from an urban building perspective. Maybe to think about how do we sell the first units if they're, they're for sale in that case. Looking at views are really important, as much as we can.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Brian, you want to go to your list of questions? Make sure we got them all answered for you guys. Councilmember Roberts.
The reasoning for the extra entrance on Quamaclet, is that just flow? Is it for emergency, like in case there's an emergency? What is the reasoning, I guess, that the...
Mayor and Councilmember Roberts, my understanding is that it's the ladder there that in case of an emergency, they just would like an additional access point.
I mean, part of me is like, obviously I want to, trust her cheap, but I'm like, I feel like you see that a lot, right? In parking lots where you have one entrance, right? You have to go around and you go out the one way. And so, if there's an emergency where there's emergency vehicles needed, they're going to park wherever they have to, right?
Right.
So,
I share your view.
I'm kind of like, do we need to have that extra entry?
I understand the ask, but the loss of parking spaces for an event that is seemingly unlikely, and then, as you point out, when there seems like there's plenty of room on the street, parking spaces across the way, even within the interior of the parking lot, it will be just as difficult to get in there from Randy's Way as it would be from Quamaclet. I don't feel like the sacrificing of the parking spaces is worth the
juice isn't worth the
Yeah,
Yeah, I get it. We can talk about it. All right. Where's our list of questions?
Sorry, you guys.
I know
Speed through the
Sugar will
slides.
be very mad at you.
Do you have what you need? I mean,
believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
And Carl, do you have what you need for?
I do, yeah, just this feedback from
Yeah.
each of you has been helpful as we continue to evolve the plans here for Plat and wanting to execute on what's a dormant building. And Rich has been very patient on this as well.
Yeah. We appreciate that patience. All right, thank you very much. All right, council, there's no more items on our regular agenda, so moving on to reports and emerging issues. Attorney Vos, you're up first.
I do not, Mayor. Thank you.
Ms. Hardy, anything from staff?
None from staff this evening, Mayor.
How about the council? Anything from the council?
I just wondered if well, it's kind of meant for
Do you need to talk to
Ms. Hardy.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess we've had lots of discussions, heard from people about the e-bikes.
Oh,
And I'm just wondering, with school starting, I've heard of kids riding their e-bikes to the middle school. I'm sure even some at ages might be riding it to the elementary school. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to talk with the school district, even, right, like Victoria Elementary, and see if like they can help curb some of that stuff, right? Like, we don't want them here type thing. So don't ride your e-bikes to school. I don't know. Or an opportunity for our CSO to go in and because I'm not sure it's getting any better, but.
yeah. Ms. Hardy, you got any thoughts on that?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple brief thoughts here. This is a challenge that many communities are struggling. So again, I know it's not just Victoria. So kind of an evolving, emerging, as they become issue for all of us as these e-bikes become more popular. We've had some success, I would say, in educating parents. What we found initially and early on is that a lot of times parents didn't really understand that there's an age limit with some of these e-bikes. And so as we start to push more information out there and educate the public on that, I think we're starting to see some relief, although it's not anywhere near a problem being solved. So we've put some signage along the trails. You may have seen that if you've been on some of our trails lately. We've also done some social media campaigns. During our truck rodeo, we got out there and did some engagement, and we've been doing some engagement in the community events that we're at, Classic Car Show, the farmers market, talking about things at the park, pop-up events that we're having. So we are trying to get the word out there. We'll be bringing to you September 22nd an e-bike ordinance. We've been working with language, doing some research, talking to other communities, and talking to the sheriff's office, our law enforcement partners on this, and seeing what they're hearing and seeing in kind of their channels. So one thing that we hadn't discussed though was having our CSO go into the elementary school and have those conversations with students, and we can look at doing that and coupling that with just regular bike safety, because we know students are riding their bikes to school. So if we kind of did some engagement around bike safety, bike etiquette, we could certainly look at doing that. So that's a great suggestion, and we'll do that. So sorry for the long-winded answer.
Yeah, I did get was visiting with a resident recently and got some great compliments on our bike safety, or bike handout that we had. So pass that along to staff. Thank you very much.
We'll do that. Thank you.
I have one other thing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead. Councilmember Roberts.
Kara's not here tonight, so I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if it's Marsh Lake, the roundabout, Marsh Lake Road and Highway 11, right? It's been delayed a couple times. Have we heard any revised opening date yet?
Mayor, Councilmember Roberts, members of the council, we have not. Kara and I did meet this afternoon, and that was one of the questions that I had asked. We have been getting a number of phone calls late last week, and we did get a number of phone calls today at City Hall with people asking that question. Unfortunately, the county's webpage is not helpful in providing any new information. So at this point in time, we do not have anything new to share. Fingers crossed. We're all hopeful that that road will reopen soon. But I will certainly share as soon as that becomes available, and then we'll make sure that we're sharing out whatever the county communicates through our channels.
And again,
You'll
it's-
be happy
Yes.
just as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
Yes.
And again, that the continued closure is just for the safety. It's not ready to open, right? I mean, with all the water and the rain and everything we've had, it's just not safe to open up
So-
not complete and it's not safe, right?
Councilmember Rife, yes, that in mayor, members of the council, essentially that's correct. It's a safety issue at this point. So what we do know and what has been shared publicly is that there was some water that was seeping through the pavement and the pavement had failed. And so a portion of the road had to be taken out and then it had to be redone. And so that's what we're working through right now. So it's not the entire thing, it's just a portion of the road. So they're hopeful. They were hopeful at the time when they began that process that it would be a quick turnaround. And so fingers continue to be crossed.
Dry weather.
Fingers crossed. All right, anything else from council? All right, there are no more items to come before the body this evening, so I am looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned.